Many of you may not know about this flag, actually a pennant, which Carl Mills discovered last year through an article in the June 1940 issue of the Canadian National Geographic. After many telephone calls and some luck, he found the 71-year-old original in Albany, New York. The photo at the top of this page is very likely the first colored photo ever taken, and is certainly one of the very few photos ever taken. Please share with me in the excitement of finding this truly historic RCAF and Squadron artifact. 400 Squadron, formed in 1932, was initially 10 Squadron when it flew from the Trethewey Farm Airfield, also known as de Lesseps Field, in Toronto from 1934 to 1939. The squadron was renumbered to 110 in 1937, and when deployed to war in 1939, still carried that number. In mid-1941, while in the UK, it was renumbered to 400. When ordered to war in late 1939, the squadron first deployed to Rockcliffe, Ottawa, Ontario, for conversion to the Lysander aircraft. The new CO at that time was Squadron Leader W.D. Van Vliet. By early February 1940, the squadron was ready to depart to the UK, first by rail to Halifax, and then by steamship across the Atlantic. The squadron was the first RCAF unit to go overseas, and they were given an official send-off in Ottawa by the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Defence. At that time, Squadron Leader Van Vliet was presented with the one-of-a-kind 110 Squadron pennant. A 12-page Canadian National Geographic article with 20 images was produced in June 1940 about the activities of the squadron from Rockcliffe to the arrival in the UK. On the front page was an image of the pennant. Carl advised,
I discovered this article some time ago and finally decided to either make a replica or find the original. I was able to get a good black and white from the War Museum in Ottawa, and this was scanned into an accurate drawing. In January, I found the original pennant with the Van Vliet family in Albany, New York. On Thursday, March 17, 2011, I drove to Albany and back almost 1,500 kilometers and returned the pennant to Toronto. I departed at 0600 and was home just before midnight.
It was an exciting moment when Carl unfolded this historic item at the Van Vliet home. He was also able to get a copy of Group Captain Van Vliet's 6 logbooks and several photos for the era that he was CO. They are being gathered by the family and will be posted to this site when available. Unfortunately, Group Captain Van Vliet died from a heart attack at age 39 in 1942, while serving as the air officer commanding the western region of Canada. The pennant measures 20 inches by 30 inches, 50 by 60 centimeters. It is identical on both sides and is made from a wool weave type of material. It is see-through when held up to the light. There are about a dozen thin spots or very small holes, but otherwise it's in pristine condition with no apparent fading. The pennant is now stored in an archival quality full-sized and clear plastic envelope. This, in turn, is kept in a full-sized and flat briefcase-shaped wooden carrying case with a handle. Next, Carl will have the pennant professionally evaluated for possible restoration or not and mounting. He will be negotiating to have the pennant kept at the National Air Force Museum in Trenton and negotiating with the family for permanent retention in Canada. This is partially complete. Beyond the donation from the Air Force Association, there will be a fundraiser to complete the project, estimated at $1,300. There will also be a few full-sized replicas made for the family and the squadron. Carl would like to thank the Van Vliet family in Albany, New York for their kindness and trust. Eileen Horning and Claire Van Vliet, daughters, Audrey Thomas, granddaughter, and Walt Horning, grandson. He would also like to thank Peggy Van Vliet of Ottawa and Lachlan Rocky Van Vliet of Carrying Place, Ontario, for their great assistance in finding the family, and Dr. Georgiana Stanciu, curator at the National Air Force Museum in Trenton, Ontario, for their interest. Thanks to Eric Fernberg of the Canadian War Museum of Ottawa and Peter Elliott of the RAF Museum in Hendon for their valuable comments to the project. Thanks to the Air Force Association Trust for their willingness to partially fund this project. Thanks to Harold Wright, who has provided further research and documentation from the National Archives in Ottawa. And lastly, thanks to Ron Wiley, who autographed and donated a 400 Squadron history book to the Van Vliet family. By way of follow-up, A decision has been made that this 71-year-old pennant will be turned over to the Directorate of History and Heritage at the Canadian Air Division at CFB Winnipeg and will be available to Air Force museums for a short-term loan. Full-sized replica pennants for the Van Vliet family and the Squadron Heritage Museum in the Squadron hangar have been made and presented at the Squadron Monument Dedication Ceremony reception on June 2, 2012.
This video was produced by Prompt Enterprises for the History Hangar.